It's time now for our daily look at what's been making waves in the French press. And this Tuesday, I'm joined on set by our press reviewer, Florence Villeminot. Good morning,
Thomas.
Florence. How are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm very well. And we're starting out, of course, with papers continuing to focus on the French government's plans, controversial plans, to tweak and reform the Labour Code. It was, of course, outlined last week, much to the disappointment of many people on the left, including many trade unionists. And, of course, we're hearing that protests and strikes are planned for later this month.
Indeed. So far, 2 big demonstrations are planned for later this month. So exactly 1 week from now on September 12th and also on the 23rd. Now, let's start by taking a look at L'Humanité, which is the communist paper very much in arms, up in arms against this planned reform. You can see what they're doing today is they interview 12 people opposed to what L'Humanité calls a huge leap backwards. So these are trade unionists, lawyers, lawmakers, 12 voices that sound the alarm over what they call the negative consequences, the dangers that these reforms will have for workers. In fact, L'Humanité says, this is an unprecedented slide backwards that will protect the employer more than the employee. And this is everything that employers have dreamed of, according to the communist paper.
Florence, speaking of employers, the business paper Les Echos takes a closer look at the reaction among that community to this reform.
It's completely different from what we were seeing in L'Humanité. Let's take a look at Les Echos. They're talking about a warm welcome from business owners. That goes for small business owners, but also the CEOs of big companies. And according to Les Echos here, everyone in the business world is globally satisfied with this reform. And there's a quote from, I guess you could say, a mid-sized business owner who has 25 employees, who says, "This new law will be a big step forward. It won't increase the number of firings, but it will make the hiring process more flexible, more fluid." And this is, of course, a point of contention, because if you ask trade unions, well, they say it's the complete opposite, that workers will lose all their protection.
Well, meanwhile, the government is moving forward with other planned reforms. This Tuesday, it's a meeting with trade unions to discuss the thorny issue of unemployment insurance.
And the government is taking advantage of the moment, I guess you could say. Once again, we can read about that in Les Echos. They're taking advantage of a particular political lull to kind of bulldoze through their agenda. So first of all, the reform of the Labour Code, now this reform of the pension system. Les Echos points out that it's a very strange period. The opposition is weak. Trade unions are open to dialogue and divided amongst themselves, and civil society seems open to change. It's kind of a perfect storm, or a political dream, if you will, but the clock is ticking. The government knows very well that this moment won't last forever, but it does want to make this enchanted parenthesis, that's what Les Echos calls it. It wants to make this enchanted parenthesis last as long as it can, and I guess take advantage of that moment to push through as much change as possible.
And one thing the government is taking advantage of to move its agenda forward is the very deep divisions between different trade unions.
That's right. We were just talking about that. French trade unions were divided amongst themselves going into these negotiations about the reform of the Labour Code. You can see here on the front page of L'Opinion, it points out that all this is really played into the hands of the government that's been able to, in a way, play with them like toys. You can see L'Opinion here, their political cartoon by CAC, likening the situation to Toy Story, which is, of course, a wonderful cartoon. So you can see Macron there playing with a Buzz Lightyear, which represents one of the trade unions, Force Ouvrière, while 2 of the other trade unions, so the CFDT and CGT, look on there a little bit jealous, I guess you could say.
And while the trade unions are divided, the opposition is also having a hard time getting itself organized.
That goes for the left, first of all. The Socialist Party, you can read about that in Le Parisien. Le Parisien says it seems like the Socialist Party doesn't know how to oppose the government. For instance, the Socialists have lashed out against these reforms, but they haven't openly called on people to demonstrate against them, even though several members of the Socialist Party have been very clear about the fact that they will demonstrate against the reform. So it seems a little schizophrenic within the party, but that goes for the Socialists and also for Les Republicains, the Conservative Party. You can read more about that in Le Figaro today. Essentially, Les Republicains are just preoccupied with themselves right now, I guess you could say, because they're having this battle for leadership. It's getting quite busy at the top. You can see Le Figaro here focusing on the 6 candidates that are in the race for the party leadership, and that election is going to take place in December, so quite some time from now. So it seems like Les Republicains might be preoccupied between now and then. And of course, these 6 people want to take the party in completely different directions, so they also seem more preoccupied in themselves than actually opposing the government.
Okay, Florence, let's move away from French politics. And the papers here in France have also been focusing on the tensions along the Korean peninsula.
It's a huge story here in France. It's a little surreal, though, I must admit, because even though it's a very serious story, French papers are I guess, talking about it in quite a light way. You can see here the front page of Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien, talking about the terrifying Mr. Kim. Now, you can see it almost looks like a movie poster or something like that. Le Parisien says that by carrying out these powerful nuclear bomb tests, the uncontrollable North Korean dictator is playing with the nerves of the international community. How far will he go? So that's the front page of Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien. If we take a look at the front page of 20 Minutes, they're focusing on what's happening inside North Korea. They say that all eyes are on Kim Jong-un, but is he really the only one pulling the strings? They take a look at what they call the choreography that's taking place inside North Korea. I must say, it's a pretty weird, perhaps terrible play on words here, because they're talking about the choreography. You can bring that down to Corée in French, so Corée du Nord, North Korea. It's a weird choice, but as I said, it just shows how French papers are talking about this. It's, on the one hand, they're taking it seriously, but they're also making jokes about it.
And finally, Florence, you have an equally important story here in France, and that's about a baby panda.
It's not all about the apocalypse, after all. It's also about babies. Now, you can read about this cute story in Le Parisien here. So this is Mini Yuan Ze.
So cute.
So cute, I must admit. This little baby was born on August the 4th at the Beauval Zoo in the Loire-and-Cher region. So a month later, well, he's doing very well, according to Le Parisien. Now, you got to keep in mind, this was a big summer story here in France. These are 2 pandas that are on loan from China. So Yuan Ze means fatso, and Huan Huan, happy, the parents of this little baby who spends his time eating and sleeping. Sounds pretty delicious. And
sounds great.
He'll only be available. The public will only be able to see him at the end of the year, but you can all gush over this photo in the meantime.
We will indeed. Florence Villeminot with the French Press Review. Thank you very much.